If you are buying a home in Arizona, you won't want to miss this video because we are going to talk all about title companies, opening escrow, and what closing costs you can expect as a buyer to pay when buying a home in Arizona. Kim, we're so excited to be here at First AZ Title, and today this video is all for the buyer that just got their offer accepted. And we're going to talk about a lot of things from what you guys do here at the title company to what closing cost buyers can expect and just what they can expect during the escrow period. So first, let's start with somebody that's never bought a home before. What is a title company? What do you guys do?
Okay, so we are basically the middleman. Our job is to be the disinterested neutral party to carry out the terms of the purchase and sale agreement between the buyer and the seller, so that the buyer is not having to write a check directly to the seller, things like that. We open escrow. We do a title search of the property. We make sure that everything that is encumbering the property that would follow the buyer and adversely affect it is taken care of.
So you really protect the buyer and the seller to ensure they're legally going to own the home and there are no issues with the title or liens on the property. I mean, you guys are doing a lot behind the scenes. I don't think a lot of people realize everything you do. And without the title company, it'd be really hard to close on a home.
Absolutely. It would be really, really hard to know what documents to draft, where to record them. It really is a lot that goes into it. So thank you very much. We would contact the buyer as soon as an escrow is open. They will deposit their earnest money with our office.
Okay, so a buyer's offer just got accepted. You guys will be reaching out to them. So you say open escrow, which basically means home is under contract. And the next step is the buyer is going to pay their earnest deposit. So the earnest deposit is listed on the second page of the purchase agreement. It's typically around 1% of the purchase price. And that earnest deposit goes to the title company. So you guys hold on to that. It is refunded back to the buyer at closing. Or, say within their inspection period, the buyer decides to cancel because of the home inspection or for whatever reason, you guys would then refund the earnest deposit back to the buyer. So what can a buyer expect? The home just went under contract. What's next with the title company?
So what's next is their real estate professional, Shannon Gillette, will send us the purchase contract so we know what the property address is, what the terms are. We will then make contact with the buyer to coordinate deposit of their earnest money. We have many options available for them to make it convenient. That can be done via personal check, cashier's check, bank wire. We also have an app that's very similar to doing a photo deposit with your bank.
Awesome.
So they typically don't even have to leave the comfort of their home.
Wow.
After escrow is open, buyer will get some disclosures from us via DocuSign. They just need to complete those, send them back to us. Obviously, if there's any questions, they're welcome to contact us. We'll go over all of the documents with them. Buyer's lender would then be reaching out to us if the buyer's getting financing, and they'll ask us what our fees are going to be, and we'll send a fee quote to the lender. The lender will then be able to start generating their estimates for the buyer as far as what to expect at closing for their down payment.
Well, that's great. And let's talk about fees and closing costs. So we kind of put together an example settlement statement based upon a $500,000 home. And what I see on average, of course, this can change based upon your contract terms or your lender, but a buyer, in addition to their down payment, can want to plan for around $5,000 in closing costs. So closing costs are, we're going to go over those. There's some title fees, taxes, HOA, things like that. One thing a buyer in Arizona will not be paying for are any real estate fees. So I always like to tell buyers, hey, my service, our team service is actually free to you. That's why it's so important to choose a very experienced, great team to have on your side to help get your offer accepted, to help find you that home, because you're not going to be paying any real estate fees typically at closing. So let's talk about some of the fees a buyer can expect.
Okay, fees that I would say buyer consistently pays. In Arizona, customary is that the buyer will pay half of the escrow fee. That's our fee to draft the documents, receive the funds, disperse the funds, get the documents recorded with the county, so to close the transaction.
Yes.
And if you're getting financing, your lender's going to want a policy of title insurance that ensures their lien position, meaning that there isn't anybody with a superior lien priority to them. In Arizona, the seller pays for the owner's policy of title insurance for the buyer, which is not common in most other states. But because the buyer's getting the loan and their lender requires the policy, that is usually a buyer expense.
And it protects the buyer. So if a buyer doesn't know what an owner's policy is, can you help explain that?
Absolutely. So title insurance is the only insurance premium that's a one-time premium that's paid. Seller pays it. This policy ensures the buyer that they have clear marketable title to the property for as long as they own the property. So if you purchase a home tomorrow and you own it for 50 years, your seller's purchased that owner's policy for you and you're covered for the whole 50 years that you own it.
Yeah.
And small example would be if 6 months from now, you're in the comfort of your beautiful new home that you're enjoying and somebody comes to your door and asserts a claim or an interest in the property. If their claim turns out to be legitimate, you have to go to court. You would put in a claim on that policy of title insurance with our company, who would then defend the title claim.
Yeah, so it really protects the buyer for just the future of the unknown.
Absolutely.
What other fees can a buyer expect to pay at closing?
Like we discussed, if the buyer's getting financing, typically any of the costs associated with that new loan will be theirs. Homeowners associations do typically require an advance payment of dues, especially in this particular market. They're just as busy as everybody else with the high turnover in sales. So it takes them sometimes a couple of months to get the new account set up for the new homeowner. So at closing, they can expect to pay depending on what they've agreed to in the terms of their agreement with the seller.
And that's a great point. So there's an addendum in the purchase contract called the HOA addendum. So if you're buying a home in an HOA, you want to read that because it'll show who's paying for the transfer fee, who's paying for if there's a capital improvement fee,
Exactly.
if there are prepaid HOA dues required. So that can vary contract by contract and in the negotiations, but there could be some HOA fees due at closing. And then back to the lender fees, the lender will also disclose those to the buyer if they have, any lender fees to pay at closing.
Yes.
Are there any property taxes that they should be aware of?
Property taxes in Arizona are paid in arrears, so you'll most likely be getting a credit of some kind from your seller at closing for whatever the current period is. But again, if you're getting a loan, your lender might require you to establish an impound account for taxes and insurance and have a couple of months in there. But all the taxes will be due and payable at closing, so they'll be paid current. But as we just discussed, if you find out post-closing that the taxes were not paid current, that's when you can contact us and you would be covered under your policy of title insurance.
Oh, good. Well, I'm sure if a first-time buyer's watching, this is all very interesting because it's a lot of information and it just proves that your team is working really hard behind the scenes to ensure you get to closing day. So we will help explain and walk through all of this, with each of our clients. But when it comes to the exciting part, your loan is final approved, your final documents are at title. Now it's time. You almost are about to get the keys to your new home. So what happens once you guys have the final lender documents?
So once we have the final lender documents, we will be contacting the buyer to make arrangements for them to sign their documents. We have lots of options. You can typically do that in our office, in the comfort of your home, your office, the location of your choosing, depending on timing. If we're talking about signing a day or so prior to the closing date, the luxury of convenience is absolutely there. But if for some reason it's kind of down to the wire, it might be like a Chinese fire drill. But our goal is always to get that transaction closed on the scheduled day so that everybody can take possession of their new home.
Yes, so the buyer needs to kind of plan for that. And sometimes it is hard to plan in advance because we need those documents from the lender.
Yes.
How long is a typical signing with a buyer?
Typical signing takes about 40 minutes to an hour, depending on the number of questions. Although these days there's so many milestones in place with lenders that there aren't a lot of surprises at the end. Usually people are very well prepared as long as they've viewed all of the things that they've seen from their lender, and they might see a few incarnations of estimates. So don't panic if you see something preliminary early on and maybe the numbers don't look entirely the way you expected. They'll get there as you go towards closing.
Well, that's great. So you've now signed. You have to sign your final documents with the notary.
Yes.
And on closing day, it's almost impossible to determine the exact time your home will close. I like to say any time before 5 p.m. So don't schedule any movers on closing day because there are so many moving parts. We're waiting for the lender to wire the final balance. We're waiting for the seller to sign. Then you're sending everything to the county recorder, which we're waiting for them to record. So closing day, anytime before 5 p.m. What happens once the home is closed?
Your advice on anytime before 5 p.m. is spot on. There are a lot of moving parts. Closing day is sometimes a little bit of an exercise in patience, and everybody's on pins and needles a lot of the day sometimes. But our goal is always to get it closed as early as possible in the day because we know that people have movers and they're excited. Everybody wants to take possession of their new home. After people sign their documents with us, typically lenders require those documents back so that they can review them before that they will fund, meaning send their funds to us. But as soon as we get those funds, that's when we can send the documents to the county for recording. It takes a couple of hours to get the confirmation sometimes, but as soon as we get it, we like to let you know as soon as possible because it's your team that's got the access to the keys that's going to make these people be able to take possession of their new home.
Yes, well, it's so exciting. It's just always so much fun on closing day, and we appreciate everything your team does to help get to closing and ensure that, everything you do with title to ensure the property is legally theirs and all of that. So do you get any common questions from buyers that maybe we haven't covered in this video?
I think some of the most common questions, and we've talked already about a lot of buyers are coming to us from Arizona, from other states. We're not a state where signing is closing. So when you sign that purchase contract and it says that you're going to be closing on February 14th, don't have in your mind that you're going to come and sit down on February 14th and sign documents. That's not a process that we have here. So it'll be a couple of days prior to. Closing funds have to be deposited in the form of a cashier's check or via wire transfer. The cashier's check would have to be deposited 1 business day prior to the closing date, and there's Arizona revised statutes dictate that, not us. But those are the most commonly asked questions.
Yeah, there's also a thing called wire fraud. So is there anything you want to mention to a buyer, what they should be aware of with that?
Absolutely. Our office will not send wiring instructions out in an unsecured email. That's for everybody's protection.
Yes.
So once we send those to you in a secure email, if you've received them, contact our office. We can verify those. And when I say contact our office, don't contact the number that's on the email. Contact Shannon Gillette if you ever get anything in your inbox that seems a little bit suspect, because these fraudsters are really good at mimicking email addresses. We're not going to tell you our wiring instructions have changed or send the funds someplace else. Just be very aware of all the correspondence that you're receiving, and if something doesn't sit right with you, follow that gut.
Yes, no, that is a good tip. So one of the common questions that I get, because you guys do send out disclosures early on in the process, where buyers have to determine how to hold their title.
Yes.
And legally, we're both not able to really advise them on that. So what do you say to that when people have questions?
I try to let people know that, like you said, can't give the advice. However, we send out an instruction form that does break down each method that they could hold title. They just need to select one of those.
What are some examples of holding title if somebody just doesn't really understand how that works?
Well, so if you're a married person, you could take title in your own name as your sole and separate property, but Arizona is a community property state, so the spouse would then be required to sign what's called a disclaimer deed. Or you can take title with your spouse. There are options in Arizona where you can hold title in a manner that makes it so if one of you passes away, your interest would then automatically go to the other without having to do a probate.
And that's probably one of the more common ones for married couples.
That is one of the most common. And we can't give advice, but if somebody calls and they have questions, we can usually walk them through it so that they're very clear on what their options are and what's best for them. Homeownership is very exciting. I know the process is very, very stressful, but I promise there's relief at the end. After it's all said and done, and we let your agent know, hey, it's recorded, they'll get you your keys, and that's when the real fun begins.
Yes, and it's such an honor to be able to walk alongside a buyer buying a home and being there through every step of the process. And when you have an experienced team on your side, they can really help ensure this is smooth and you make it to closing, because there's a lot going on behind the scenes throughout the whole process and even on closing day. So it's just such an honor to help people. Thank you for all you do here and everything First Arizona does. Our team loves working with you guys, and I know our buyers have been so happy.
Likewise, Shannon. It's our pleasure. We always enjoy working with you and your clients.
Well, thank you. Can't wait for the next closing.
Likewise.
Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions on what you learned today, please reach out to us. You can learn more about our team online at GilletteGroupAZ.com. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Shannon_Gillette, and we'll see you next time.